Hello, Dominic here from the Bournemouth Writing Festival. Looking forward to welcoming you to Bournemouth on the 26th, 27th and 28th of April 2024. Now, on the Friday, Saturday and Sunday, we have three different evening events happening after 7 o'clock. On the Friday, we have a Friday night social, which is a networking event where you can come and meet and mingle other delegates, other attendees and speakers and writers within the area. Now, that's going to be taking place at Flirt Cafe in the Triangle, and it's £10 to get in, and that includes your first drink. On the Saturday night, we have a live music slash spoken word extravaganza. So again, with a live band, you can have the chance to recite your poem, and the band behind you will be riffing and putting some musical notes to your poem. Now we're going to have a very special guest, MC Gramsci, that's going to be emceeing the whole event. So make sure you get a ticket to that high energy and exciting event on the Saturday night. And on the Sunday night, we have a really, really fascinating and exciting and brilliant showcase finale of 4 of our local arts community groups. And one of those people involved I'm speaking to today. So hopefully we might get a few hints and a sneak peek as to what's going to be happening on that event on the Sunday evening. So without much further ado, I'm delighted to welcome Aanka Batta and Jasmine Isa Quereshi, who will be delivering an interactive talk called Decolonising Writing, Unpacking Identity and Writing Intersectionality on Sunday, the 28th of April at 12:30 p.m. at Pavilion Dace. So Dr. Aanka Batta is a performance poet, curator and mentor. She was born in South Asia and now lives in Bournemouth. Her overall vision brings awareness and issues around race and racial politics with the hope to contribute to genuine multiculturalism. She has performed nationally and at various festivals across the country, and most recently on BBC Radio Solent, where she performed her incredible poem, Ocean. So welcome, Aanka.
Hi, Dominic. Thanks so much. Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be a part of the festival again.
Great to see you. And Jasmine is a marine biologist, activist, writer and journalist, and has published work in a variety of different publications, including BBC Wildlife, Gay Times and the Metro. And honestly, if I was to talk about all the things that Jasmine has done, I'll be here forever. So welcome, Jasmine.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm very excited. And thank you for piling on the praise on my extremely long bio.
Thank you so much for joining us at this year's festival. So let's start with Aanka. Aanka, tell us a little bit about yourself, particularly in terms of your vision and tying it to your work.
Right. Okay. So Dominic, I'm a poet. I'm an academic, and I'm a consultant on equity, diversity matters. But most importantly, I am an immigrant. I wasn't born here. I didn't grow up here. And I, given what a political bait the issue of immigration and migration is today, I'm actually very concerned about the state of migrant writers and artists in the arts and in literary spaces. So my work is about sort of decolonizing writing from the perspective of sort of looking at migration as an integral part of what shapes our identity, and creating more space and more room for other immigrant writers. So that's kind of like a little bit of what I do. As you've already said, I do a lot of sort of poetry in the area and a lot of other equity diversity work in the area. And yeah, that's a bit about me. I can't remember the second part of your question. What was it?
I asked about how you tied together your vision of trying to create multiculturalism to your work through poetry and all the other things you do.
Yeah, I mean that was a bit of an old bio that you read out. Actually, I don't know what I feel about multiculturalism, but how do I tie together my vision? I think what I'd say is that having grown up in a different culture, really what I feel is that I sort of people like me get to have this perspective on British values, British expectations, British ways of writing that perhaps someone who's grown up here, can't quite see from the outside. So being a migrant person, I think I tend to really use that in my work. I tend to use that lens a lot, in the way that we do metaphors, and the way that we do dissent, rebellion, emotion, and I try to really bring that into my work and highlight that. So that's how I bring the being a migrant and being a writer together. But also importantly, my work is a lot about how do we make our emotions speak to our geopolitics. So how do we as individuals speak to, through writing, if you like, the environment that we are in, the political, social, economic environment that we're in, and this sort of intermingling of the inner and the outer world. And yeah, so this is the stuff that I focus on in my writing that I want to bring to the festival this year.
Great, thank you. So Jasmine, nature is a huge thread through your work, and you combine that through your work with the trans and queer community. So tell us a little bit about you and what you do, and perhaps some of the challenges and successes that that brings.
Yeah, I mean, I think my obvious connection to the trans and queer community is that I come from the trans and queer community, and that I am a trans and queer person. And my involvement with nature is actually one of the reasons that I think I discovered my transness and my queerness, because growing up, I grew up in a very strict Islamic environment. I grew up in a very much an environment where I felt there were strains of my culture and my community within that environment. But because I grew up in central London, because I grew up in a place where whiteness, where there was conformity, where there were lots and lots of cultural norms that I didn't necessarily understand, but they were forced on me, I felt that I had to grow despite them. And so I was oftentimes as a kid searching for myself, and I'm still searching for parts of myself in the world, and being in nature has helped me to connect and reflect with the innate parts of myself far more than anything else I've ever found. So my work, which you've kind of touched on, as a journalist, as a storyteller, as someone who's basically obsessed with wildlife and nature since a very young age, this has all come about from me trying to find out who I am, and trying to find out more about that identity and the identities that are presented to me by society, because I still have questions around transness and queerness and what that means to me, and how that links into my Pakistani Muslim side, how that links into my, immigrant parents and my immigrant grandparents, and all of this, and the ancestry that I have, and how does that all tie together? So I think that's very intersectional of me to say, which is super on brand for this talk. But for me, it's directly where that inspiration comes from. It's from nature. Nature is something that has always given me a place of solace. It's always given me something to work with, something to decipher, something to dissect. And so I feel that my published work and my written work and my spoken work all tie into this idea of bridging the gaps between topics. And I've only ever been able to do that from the reflection that I've got via being in nature. So for me, it's inherent to my intersectionality to talk about nature and to talk about biology and ecology, because that's just the way that I found myself. And I think when we talk about intersectionality, we are often talking about people and society, and that intersectionality actually becomes quite sectional when you simply talk about humans and people. And so to bridge the gap between non-humans and humans, and the ways that intersectionality adheres to both, is actually something that helps us see beyond the lines as well of our race, of our gender, and of our inherent identities, because it helps us to see almost completely beyond socially constructed identities and beyond to the identities of non-humans and the perspectives that we impose upon them. So I think that answers your question. I think I think if I were to say anything about intersectionality, it would always just be connected to nature, because that seems to be in my every waking hour.
It seems like such an interesting topic, and I'm so glad that this is coming to the writing festival this year. So the talk that the things you're going to be discussing is called Decolonizing Writing, Unpacking Identity and Writing Intersectionality. So Aanka, could you tell us a little bit about what you're going to be discussing during this session?
Yeah, I mean, this is a decolonizing session mostly because we're both brown, right? Jess and I, we're gonna kick up a massive brown riot in this session, I think. What we're gonna be covering, really, so I mean, for me, I know that when I started sort of engaging with social justice topics after like 10, 12 years of being in this country, when I finally had the space to sort of engage with the social political environment that I was in, and the privilege, you know, permanency in the country and so on. I started, like, everywhere I went, and I was like, you know, like talking about racism or talking about how immigrants are talked about and treated. I was just getting, oh, but you know, I've also had it hard, and I've also had it hard because of this reason and that reason. And it was such a struggle to sort of have an interactive engagement over this, you know, and mostly what I found was just sort of people trying to protect their identity and, you know, trying to tell me about themselves. And I found that intersectionality really made that spacious. So when I stumbled upon intersectionality, which I think has always existed, especially in many ethnic cultures, you know, in many ancient cultures, it was like sort of rediscovering, if you like, this space of, okay, now we can talk about how different facets of our identities intersect. Now, we don't have to say, I have it better than you for this reason, or you have it better than me for that reason. Now we can actually sort of see and talk about and have language for what's coming up here, what's coming up between us and what's coming up around us. So I really want to be able to sort of bring that into the talk and you know, give an idea of what intersectionality has done for me, but also very importantly, what I want to be able to do in this session is to draw attention to, in our fight for writing about something, or in our desire to talk about something, we've, as a people, left many people behind, and we've left many bodies behind. And I think to bring the body back and to bring those identities, even if they are facets of our own identity that have gotten left behind, back into writing, is the core of what decolonization and intersectionality does. So I want to talk about the body. I want to bring up sort of somatics into writing. How do you use somatics to write a poem, or to write a short story, or to write a monologue? And yeah, so that's basically, that's the two things I really want to do in this talk. Yeah.
So Jasmine, have you got anything you'd like to add to that? I know you've hinted to me that there might be some poetry in your session.
Yes. So as a poet, and as someone who writes poetry now, apparently professionally, it's something that I think I stumbled across when I was really trying to reflect on my identity and the intersectionality of my identity. I generally believe that everyone is an intersectional person, that everyone has multiple sections to them. But the difference is that some people are more obviously intersectional. And I think for people who are global majority people, who are immigrant people, who are queer people, the more obviousness and the more visceral quality of your intersectionality almost forces you to see the world in a completely different light. And you are able to see storytelling, you are able to see structures, you are able to see writing, you are able to see various tools in the world and perspectives from a completely different viewpoint. And so you tend to learn different things. You learn different ways of doing things. And what I think I want to touch on, and I want everyone to be able to understand, is that my transness and my queerness has been something that I've really struggled with as an immigrant person. But then on top of that, I've had to struggle with my immigrant past and my status now as someone who is a global majority person existing in a primarily Eurocentric society. And that has really limited me in terms of what I can feel and exist within. And so I've had to develop new ways of progressing. And these new ways often manifest themselves as tools and alternative systems. And so I'd love to touch upon alternative ways of writing, alternative ways of seeing storytelling, and kind of pull back the covers a bit on a lot of different perspectives that mainstream society just has. And once you go deeper into that, you start to realize how many more perspectives and understandings there are of the world, and how many more ways we can live and exist. So I think it's about writing and it's about storytelling, but it also leaks into just general perspective of the world and opening up your perspective of the world and your eyes on a lot of different ideologies of the world. And my poetry has allowed me to do that, because it's been such an amazing part of me that's gone forward without being constrained by multiple editors, by by laws and rules and policies, which other types of writing often are. And so I think poetry is an incredible and one of the most authentic and raw ways that I can communicate how I feel about things, because it almost exists only as unedited. Because if it is edited, then it becomes a completely different poem. Whereas with an article or with a story or anything like that, you edit it, it's still the same thing. But with poetry, you can spawn so many different types simply by it being so authentic. So I think poetry for me will definitely, it's Aanka's bread and butter, but it's something that I've found has very much liberated me, especially when I'm talking about subjects which I think can become lost in like scientific rhetoric and natural history. And they're things that are tied down a lot by mainstream assumption. And with poetry, you're able to liberate yourself a lot of the time from those assumptions. So poetry definitely, and a change in perspective maybe, if we're lucky.
Okay, wonderful. So Aanka, what are the takeaways that you're hoping people will leave with? And I think you might have a poem that you might that you'd like to read out right now. So Aanka.
Okay. I'll talk a little bit about the takeaways, and then I'll read a small section of my poem. I don't want to take up a lot of time and read a full poem. Takeaways. Everyone is talking about diversifying the workplace and inclusion and equity and diversity and intersectionality, and how to, every call for writing lately is about writing intersectionally. I think this session that we're going to do at the Writing Festival is going to be about offering people a toolkit with which to respond to this call, right? So when there is a call for writing intersectionally or decolonizing something, what tools can I use? What tools are at my disposal within my reach to respond to that with? How do I write about this topic intersectionally? That's what I think that this talk is going to be about. And also, how do I connect with myself as I'm writing and my surroundings as I'm writing, right? I'll just read this just 2 paragraphs from a poem that I wrote in 2016, actually. And I was organizing a fundraiser for Syrian refugee families that had moved into the area where I was in the UK. And I was like, as I was going through this organizing of this fundraiser, and I was on the organizational side, I just sort of had this really projective identification, if you like, with working with developing something for these families, because I sort of, we're both migrants, right? The refugee families and I are both from another culture, from another country, in this place, coping with all the newness and everything that means. So I wrote a poem about that as an ode to the families, and I'll just read out the last 2 paragraphs of that poem. So it says something like this. And just like that, you wake up here to this shy autumn sun. And just like that is the myriad of the entire human condition. settled unnervingly in the cups of your eyes, restless tears that beg you to consider. Who are we when we can no longer run to love for cover? Who are we when the singularities of our truth no longer hold? Who are we when lust and fear feel no different? Who are we when the hunger of our hearts is so terribly naked, so terribly exposed? And yeah, I wanna be able to create things like this in the session at the festival.
Wow, thank you so much. That's brilliant, and very much looking forward to seeing you both at the Writing Festival. And now, before I say goodbye to you, I did hint right at the beginning of this session that Aanka is actually part of our Sunday night finale as well. Which is, the title is called Writing Home: Stories from the Edge of Print, and it touches a lot of on a lot of things that we talked about today. So the Sunday night finale is a pay what you can event. It's at the Pavilion Dace, and it's at 7:30, and it's showcasing 4 different arts community groups within our local area, and that's with Vita Nova, the Outsiders Project, Word Breakers and Silencers, and your organisation, Aanka Kainata. So are you able to give us any little hint or taster of what's to come?
All I'm going to say is Kainat. So Kainat is a collective of local poets of color in the area. And Kainat is Urdu for the universe. That's what it means. It's one of my favorite words in the world. And you might just witness another woman of color from the collective writing home on stage. So that's all I'm going to say.
That's a lovely hint of what's to come. Now, we could have spoken all night. The two of you are fascinating people, and hopefully that's a little taster of what's to come. And I'm sure there's going to be poetry galore during that, as well as some fascinating in-depth discussion. So thank you so much, Aanka and Jazz, for joining me today. Now, Aanka's and Jasmine's talk is called Decolonising Writing, Unpacking Identity and Writing Intersectionality, and that's on Sunday the 28th of April at 12:30 at Pavilion Dace. So thank you again, both of you, for joining me today, and look forward to seeing you both in Bournemouth, as well as the rest of you. Take care.